So, contextual advertising has been billed as sort of, the great hope of the industry, the thing that sort of makes all the hurt go away. And we are very fortunate here to have representatives from 4 companies that are doing very cool and yet very different things around contextual. So I'm going to start with Marika at the end here. Just tell them who you are, who you work for, and then what your company is doing in this space. Because I think normally I don't let people do these long intros, but I think here it's really important because it gives you a sense of what's possible and who we're talking to.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alan. I'm Marika Rock. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Curve Interactive. And at Curve, we process video down to the Curve pixel edge. We've had a patent and have been doing that since 2017. So we're able to look at video down to the object level. And so when we're doing deals with the Warners and the NBCs of the world, the way we think about contextual is, can we look at the content for shoppability? And when we're doing that, we have a layer of context that's included in that offering. So at a high level, that is us, and I'll drill in with Alan.
Okay, Raghu.
I am Raghu Kodige. I'm the CEO and founder of Anoki. Anoki is an AI company that helps advertisers find contextually relevant places to put their ads in. We work with all the publishers to, especially people with fast and AVOD content, to find scene-level contextual data. What that means is we analyze every scene in every show, every movie, know what is the context in that scene, and then if there is an ad pod happening right after that, we pass that context into that ad pod so you can put something relevant into that. And this is obviously very, very beneficial for advertisers because they get better targeting, but it also helps all of the content partners to increase their CPMs and fill rates. So we are very excited to be here.
Great. Bill.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Michaels. I am the Chief Product Officer at Gracenote. So Gracenote is a digital metadata company. So what we provide is throughout the ecosystem, metadata on all types of professionally produced content. So that could be every movie, show, episode. We have where it's available, what time it's showing, where it's showing, as well as all the other attributes are on the cast, crew, descriptions, imagery, everything you would need to sort of build think of it as a TV operating system, an MVPD, any sort of search and discovery product. So as part of that, we're weaving in AI and lots of elements of our product. So that goes into how we help with search, but also how we will be leveraging it for ads. So what we do now is as you consume a piece of content, we know a lot of things on what we think of as at the entity level. We're now looking at AI as how we can now go within the scene itself along the lines of what everyone else is bringing up here too. So think of it as we have at the outside packaging, we have a lot of rich data that helps the advertiser and the content owner understand what's inside. And then as we go down to the scene level, we can expose that and enrich it, sort of adorn what we have on the outside.
And last but not least, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Scott Dahlgren, brand director at Wurl for business development. So Wurl essentially is an ad tech company that helps streaming companies make the jump from cable to streaming. So we help facilitate them building fast channels. They'll upload their content onto our platform, and we'll help them monetize and distribute that content. So as part of that, we have a contextual offering called Brand Discovery, where we are scanning all of that content before the ad break and scoring it for things like brand safety, for things like genre detail, and then most importantly, emotions. So what emotions are all of these scenes conveying? But the scenes are every scene before the ad break, so billions of hours of content. And then we'll match those emotions of the content with the emotions of our advertisers' creative. And what we found is when joy meets joy or suspense meets suspense, the viewer is more engaged with the ad. And so that's how the context of contextual advertising that we're operating in.
Gotcha. Now, contextual advertising at some level isn't new, right? If you think back to what we did with, back in the Nielsen, back in the early days, the assumption was, okay, who's home during the day watching TV? Housewives, because that's what existed in the 60s, and we'll target cleaning products to them or whatever. So there's still a lot there are a lot of people, and I hear this a lot, who sort of haven't figured out, like, okay, that was 50 years ago, contextual is a whole different thing now. So I'll start with you, Bill. What are some of the big misconceptions that you still get hit with about contextual, and like sort of how do you explain where it is today?
Right. So yeah, even contextual, like soap operas were effectively contextual ads. I'd say also contextuals exist in web advertising for a long time. There's GrapeShot, there's multiple companies that are able to look at a URL, parse it, tell you what's on it, and then inform your buy in real time. That's worked incredibly well. I think one of the misconceptions, we use it as a blanket statement for a lot of different use cases. So when you're positive targeting, those are specific in the web URL case, and I think probably likely for TV too, is you're looking for positive keywords. But there's also brand suitability, brand safety, which is a very different use case, and that gives you a lot more scale. So I think actually one thing is misconception is that we munge together a lot of different use cases and just call it contextual, but they're very specific. The technology is somewhat similar, but the scale of what the advertiser can reach is very different.
Gotcha.
You can apply brand suitability everywhere. You can only find a few things that have a very specific mood you're looking for.
Okay, now, Scott, you seem to perk up when I ask this question.
Well, I'll just take an extension of what Bill was talking about. I mean, one misconception of contextual advertising, I think, is contextual advertising 1.0, which is you would target a genre of show, so sports target. But we've all seen sports shows, and you can have just a number of different scenes. Rudy, for the first half, I was just telling these folks in the early room, it's a very sad show. It only starts to get inspirational towards the second half of the show. So being able to do that at the scene level, I think, is just a natural evolution of contextual targeting.
Gotcha. Marika, what's the one misconception you're always clearing up?
I mean, there's quite a few, but
You can get more than one.
Well, Curve is also providing tons of data at the scene level, and I think there's a misconception that for at least the premium publishers that we work with, like the Warners and the NBCs, that it's actually very turnkey for them to activate in those scenes right now. There's a tech stack shortcoming there that we're working across within that level. So it's a misconception that it's simple to do that at scale today. We also add a creative component, which adds another layer of complexity there, but it's quite complex to deliver. What you all are saying is contextual's been around for a long time. It's actually quite complex in terms of what we're trying to organize into the scene. There's also a lot of the agencies and advertisers want these very precise moments. There's a misconception in that as well in terms of misconception is maybe not the right word, but making sure that we can deliver on those moments in a scalable way. Is also something that we're always trying to help our advertisers and agencies work with us and bridge them to the Warners and NBCs of the world to figure out how we actually use the precision that makes us unique in a way that actually adds value to the scale that you expect within CTV and not actually add a problem.
That's good. Raghu.
Yeah, I think I want to add a slightly different point, which is actually about CTV itself, right? A lot of people don't realize that there are no cookies in CTV, which means unlike the web, where you have all these breadcrumbs of data that you can use to do precise targeting, CTV for the most part is untargeted. That's why you see random ads whenever you're watching your favorite shows. What contextual does is actually provides at least a first-party data set that is coming directly from the content that an advertiser can use to put something relevant to the scene that somebody is watching, right? So the importance of contextual targeting is actually lost on a lot of people because they compare it to the web and think, web targeting should work on CTV, and that's the biggest misconception we are fighting in the market, especially when we go and talk to people who don't know this.
But it is authenticated, right? So you don't have a cookie, but you know for most inventory, you know who the user is because they're logged in.
That's in the ad-supported ecosystem, most users are not even logged in. Or even if they're logged in, the platforms are not passing the data to the publishers or whoever is actually selling the inventory. So there's a huge problem in the industry that people are not actually focused on, which is there's not enough data passing through the ad bit stream that an advertiser can access to make those ad buys.
But for the direct sold, it's kind of like a walled garden though, right? You're logged in, they can, like Roku can know exactly who you are.
Direct sold ad campaigns can be based on that, but everybody else is essentially...
You're saying just for the programmatic buys, they lose that.
Yeah, programmatic, which is a huge portion that most of the audience here are concerned about because they're selling a lot of their inventory on programmatic and they're wondering why my CPMs and fill rates keep going down. This is one of the biggest reasons, which is there isn't first-party data accompanying that could potentially elevate that. Now, adding genre and other things help, But the more data you can bring, that is what the advertisers are looking for, you get higher CPMs and higher fill rates.
Well, we're also adding, because it is quite addressable when you start to get direct into, like, we're working with Disney, they're building their own tech stack, and we're hooked in there. So we're providing the contextual data, and then Disney is the master of their data. So that's how Curve is working, almost through like just a different supply chain for the advertiser. So kind of in alignment with what you were saying, it is pretty addressable when you are working with NBC, Disney, et cetera, through their platforms and their ad servers. So I agree that we're adding the first party data set, but we're adding the first party data set, and then from where Curve sits, where the publisher has the power to connect it with the first party data that they have, and we're adding the context to their ecosystem, which is adding a ton of value, increasing CPMs. But the percentage of addressability there is going up pretty high when you go the premium route.
Are those interoperable? Like, in other words, like if I'm like I can buy across NBC and Disney, or they're each sort of in their own little world?
So great question. If anyone is here from those publishers, but we are working in the ecosystems that are interoperable. So Curve is integrated into Freewheel. We're integrated into the SSPs like Magnite and others. But the publishers hold the power on what they choose to allow to be purchased. So that I want to make that very, very clear. So we're the exclusive processor for Warner, for example. So we've processed all of the Warner Max content, and even though it is interoperable as we're putting it into Freewheel, Magnite, et cetera, they get to decide how it's distributed, which is, I do want to work on with them on long term, so that we can, activate moments across multiple of them. If, we're processing it, but that's a choice that we've run into across the premium side.
Okay, now Scott, this is sort of what you guys do, so let's,
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate in that we have access to 95 billion monthly impressions. So that scale affords us the opportunity to, add in audience layers on top of contextual targeting. Right. And yes, we're very fortunate to sit in that place.
Gotcha. And what are you seeing, in terms of this?
I mean, this is kind of the fragmentation that I think we had talked about earlier, and the inherent challenges of just buying CTV with different metadata, different taxonomy, different reporting, different delivery structures. I think over time, as contextual advertising grows, we'll have to have some standardization that'll allow people to transact across, some of the walled gardens you mentioned and others. So for our part, we are, signing up partnerships with multiple SSPs and DSPs and bringing that scale to bear. But it is a challenge in the industry. Yeah.
The standardization is going to allow all boats to rise, because it's going to allow the advertisers to buy within these, what we all do in a more streamlined way. So we push for standardization. We're all about it. And I know the methodologies behind how we get there could differ, but with Warner, NBC, others that I've mentioned, we provide them IAB and GARM alongside the object level and shoppable data that's very unique to us, because they need to be able to organize it in infrastructures that match other things that they're doing. So we're all about standardizing, and think that whoever's going to own that needs to move a bit faster, but we're all about it.
Yeah, no, just if you're not picking up on this, like, all of these guys are pushing really hard, standardize, and all the big media companies like, we're going to be the winners. We're going to not, play nicely with everybody, and that's one of the big tensions that's sort of happening now. Raghu, you look like
I'm going to compare this to sort of how ACR, which was another technology that Alfonso, my previous company, was involved in, brought to market, along with ACR from Gracenote and Vizio and many others. Mm-hmm. And even though these were all different and there was never any standardization, once we started working with the buying community, there was standardization, because the buyers start asking everybody, can you do this? Because, Roku came and said they can do this, and Vizio came and do this. And so to me, as the demand develops for this, there will be standardization. Mm-hmm. I think while we all want it yesterday, we should also be patient and say, let's first get the buying side to adopt this technology, to use it continuously, and then standardization will happen. On our part, we partnered with Magnite recently. There was a press release last week, and Magnite is one of the largest SSPs They work with pretty much every publisher and platform. So, that's our way of trying to make sure that there's standardization by working with some of the biggest, largest players, so that there is the same data is passing through, regardless of which advertiser is buying, and that helps kind of bring more uniformity into what we're doing.
I like the ACR analog. Sure.
Yes.
And then also, we got a standard with ACR, but the industry sort of coalesced around 3 or 4 use cases for ACR. It took a few years, but then once those lanes were established, everyone could sell into those and then differentiate on data sources and other things. But those sort of lanes had to be set before scale could really be brought in. I imagine something similar will happen here too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there was, and to that point, there was a ton of not understanding ACR back in the day on the agency side. I'm only exaggerating slightly. When we did our first report on ACR, that I would talk to very senior people at agencies, and they would almost say so there's a little man in the TV shouting out, "They're watching Modern Family now." And it's did you not Google it? But anyway, I digress. I want to stick with you, Raghu, on this one, since you, we're talking about standardization and everything. Are we able to use the other part of streaming advertising, which is demographic-based targeting? Can you do that with contextual? Is that something that you can sort of do a little bit of both?
Yes. So think of contextual as sort of your base layer, right? Don't run ads without any targeting. At least start with contextual, and then on top of it, you can bring any first-party data you have, or even third-party audience segments. Anything else that you think can filter that audience down to exactly what you want, that contextual targeting allows for all of those. Yep. So, and people are doing that. They try to find all the pizza scenes, but then they will isolate it to a particular geolocation, or they'll isolate it to a particular time of day, right? So there are ways already, brands and agencies are adopting to using contextual with other time and tested techniques that they use.
Yeah. I think you can take it one step further, that you can have multiple layers of contextual plus audience. And so that's the way it played out on the web and through large DSPs. You can you can have your brand safety contextual component, you can have your positive keyword contextual buy, and then you can have multiple audience segments. So you have a lot of layers there of audience or of data that you can apply, and there's sort of multiple,
Right, but did that work? Let me just ask you, did that work on the web because it was either Google or Meta, and I got that whole audience? Whereas with TV, it's such a fragmented audience. Is it tough to sort of layer that in?
It worked on the open web because of data providers.
Okay.
Contextual, third-party data providers figured out how to do that. And once the lanes were established with the DSPs on how to activate it, that's what lit it up. So we have those DSPs now with buying on these CTV apps. So I think that infrastructure is already set. Yeah.
And just to add on to Bill's point, I think we encourage adding audience layers to emotional contextual targeting. Do your typical millennial mom target, but then do millennial moms plus emotions, and then let's test. And so I think the more layers we can add, the more testing we'll get. It's better for everybody.
And Marika, are you guys doing the same?
Yeah, we are. So a good example of this is if we're processing for Paramount like an episode of Survivor, and Paramount is very addressable. We can target a group of users and give them moments for, I know this is kind of mean, but it was real, for Uber Eats inside of a Survivor episode versus the moment, it was real, versus moments for like an REI. And they use the addressable layer there to say this group of users is more interested in targeting and shopping the moments with REI, and this group of users is heavy orderers for Uber Eats. So there's kind of some of the examples of how we're actually seeing those layers, but I'm in complete agreement.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with you because you've sort of veered into my next question. Was are there certain sort of categories or brand categories that are much better suited for contextual? Like it would seem like you just mentioned Uber Eats. There's food, boom, got it. But then there's other things like that you may not like, a projector or something where does that fit in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So when you have multi-modes, like most of us do, you're just using different tags for the different advertisers. So I would say no, that all advertisers can benefit from contextual layers. But we're working on some alcohol brands with one of our publishers. They're going to use very different targeting mechanisms and of the contextual infrastructure than when we activate with like a Walmart across NBC. So there is, I feel like all verticals of advertisers benefit from contextual and kind of pairing the different kind of location, facial recognition, like all of those different layers. They work differently for all of the advertisers, but I would say they all have an application.
Very cool. Now, Scott, you guys are doing a lot with emotion too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said. I would just add that emotions, the more you evoke an emotional response in a creative, I think the more success you'll have in matching it with an emotional piece of content. I think of like the ASPCA and animal cruelty and watching a piece of content that may have already put you in an empathetic mood or, willingness to act. So we see, CPG, beauty, some categories are just inherently more emotional. Will probably perform better than, say, an AT&T rate plan, which doesn't really invoke too much of an emotional response one way or the other.
Gotcha. Bill, what are you guys seeing?
I would say it's another data signal, and we're talking about brand now, but there's also great utility here, I think, for performance buys. So I am probably.
Remind me again, what is a performance buy?
Performance buy would be the goal or the outcome you're looking for is not reaching an audience and is not sort of views against a specific audience or maybe a brand survey uplift. It's probably the goal is I want somebody to buy something within a look back window of 2 days, right?
Right, which is usually not something that TV was traditionally not used for that
at all,
sort of
right?
stuff.
So
right.
we know the walled gardens are masters of this, right? CTV is just starting there too. So these new data signals then can go into feedback models, so optimization can be done for that. So that's a totally different type of buy. As a consumer, I don't see it much at all on my CTV consumption, but I imagine that would be the next step, and these signals certainly could be an element into that.
Raghu.
So we actually, thought about this deeply because after talking to brands.
You think about things deeply, just in general.
Brands and agencies, right? This question kept coming up, is this applicable to me? So what we did was we recently released a product called Context IQ Copilot. And within that, a brand can come and simply put, what's the brand and what's the product that they're running the campaign for. Let's say it's Nike running campaign for shoes. And then we have AI actually analyze that and say, well, these are the types of scenes you should target. Maybe it's running scenes, it's basketball scenes, it could be hiking scenes. And they can decide if they like all of those suggestions, they can take out a few, they can add their own suggestions. So it gets them thinking right away of how to use the contextual data for their particular use case. And then they can select all the ones that they like and we can pass it all into their campaign. We also allow them to upload their creative, and similar to what Scott was saying, we analyze the tone and the sentiment in the creative and then try to match that to various scenes and show them a sample of scenes and say, are these the ones that would be relevant for your campaign? So these are ways we are trying to help someone who's new to contextual IQ to kind of understand the power behind it. And once they see that, they're really bought into it, right? Then they come up with more and more ideas, and that helps us to really get the adoption going very, very quickly.
Very cool. Very cool. So that actually is sort of spurs something that's following on this. So as we start having better metadata and saying, okay, brand, Acme widgets, people who are more prone to buy Acme widgets, buy these, watch these kinds of shows, and these kinds of shows tend to have these sort of themes to them, emotions and stuff. Is that going to start to impact the creative? In other words, is that going to be a loop where the agency is like, okay, make funny ads because your people like funny shows? Marika.
I mean, absolutely. I'm interested in how the agency is going to kind of keep up with it because they have I was going to say issue and I didn't mean it that way, but they have an approval requirement that comes up that I'm interested to see how that's going to work into the generative side of it. So with our premium publishers, where we're starting with is the blocks that they produce. So some of them create like these brand blocks. So you see these bumpers. So Curve is utilizing the contextual data that we're generating and actually generating generative versions of those for brands to increase